Welcome back to A People's Guide to Publishing. I'm Joe Beal, the founder and CEO of Microcosm Publishing and Distribution. I'm also the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, which distills what I've learned from selling millions of books over the past 25 years.
I'm Ellie Blue. I'm the editorial and marketing director here at Microcosm. We are an independent mid-list publisher based in Portland, Oregon. We have 14 employees, over 650 titles in print with 20 to 40 new books per year, and we distribute thousands of titles from other publishers.
We started this podcast so that we can share what we've learned with newer publishers so that you can learn from our mistakes.
Or maybe you just want to understand the publishing industry.
This week, we are going to answer a reader question. I read a very early version of this book, which was atrociously written gibberish. I did know the author, who died about a year ago, and whose other writing was rather readable. The book keeps getting delayed, and it's weird to me that Simon Schuster wanted this thing in the first place. Why do things like this happen? A lot to unpack here.
There is a lot to unpack here. Where do you want to start?
So, it is, I guess, a whole lot to unpack here. I guess the first part is that, I looked up the book because I was not familiar with it, because there's literally millions of books, millions of forthcoming books, millions of books in existence. And I found out that the book was not published by Simon & Schuster, as the questioner alleged, but in fact published by a independent press that is distributed by Simon & Schuster, which is a very different beast. Mm-hmm. And so, and this is, we ran into this similar problem some years ago where, a bookstore was saying that they were having a hard time. They get these boxes from Penguin Random House, but some of the books are independent, and they just, they were having trouble, teasing that out and figuring that out, how that was possible. And that is because even for the big five houses, they do have distributed lines because they're growing their viability in new directions, because that helps them to sell into, different places and just have greater reach, even for their own books as well. So that's sort of one aspect of it. And then another aspect is obviously the way book contracts work, and which is to say that, that book was probably signed on to 2 years before the author died. And then, what a publisher will do, especially a publisher like this, which is widely regarded in the industry as a paper mill, meaning they publish tons and tons and tons of books, is that, they look at all of their IP, meaning what they hold publishing rights to, and then what is in print and where they're getting money, and then they'll sort of sometimes tuck that away for a rainy day, or I think, as we can both attest, sometimes that rainy day is upon you where you've, proclaimed a publication date for a book, and then you find that as that date arrives where it needs to be finished being edited, it's just not there yet, let's say.
That is such a kind and gentle way to put it. And
so, especially if the author is deceased, then you're obviously you have a greater hurdle to jump over.
So yeah, and that's when you delay a book.
Sometimes over and over and over.
Right. And sometimes you're like, maybe we'll put this out in fall 2022 and find one of the author's colleagues to be the co-author and ghostwrite the rest. And yeah.
And so much of that stuff is idealism more than it's, really being okay, well, if we just had 2 more months, that would be great. It's more like what you're actually proclaiming is, I can't think about this right now. We'll get back to this later.
Or we already invested so much into this book, we can't afford to let it go. But we also can't afford to put it out as it is.
Yeah, and you don't want to have something that is in embarrassing condition. And this happens a lot where, something will have a certain amount of hype because it will proclaim to have new information about historical events. And then, when it comes down to it, the way the author delivered the book is just not very good. Or it's, I believe the quote was incoherent gibberish.
Oh.
So,
As, many of our first drafts are.
Yeah, it happens. And so...
I personally live in fear of dying with first drafts that somebody might read.
Your own or someone else's?
My own.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm not afraid of reading other people's first drafts.
As well, you might should be, though. But...
Desensitized.
So, and they're... And I guess that kind of like ties into the whole idea that like publishing is a rat race, It's not like a rat race quite to the degree that like Wall Street is, but it is in the sense that like you never quite know when something will catch up with you. Like, whether that's an idea or a manuscript or like something you've been workshopping for 5 years, as we can attest for one of our fall books, to, just various, things that you develop in-house. And, so you don't really ever want to proclaim the rainy day past. You want to be like, future rainy day. Perhaps by then, this will be like reaching the perfect alignment of both finished and seasonally significantly topical. But should we summarize?
I don't know
anything
if it
else
can
you want
be
to say?
Summarized.
Oh, it can be summarized.
Summarize it.
Anything else you want to add?
About why this book wasn't published?
This conflagration of events happened.
I guess, like, publishing sometimes feels just like this very slowly moving series of catastrophes, and you're constantly sort of like... It's like, your spaceship is leaking and you're just, like, patching each hole with masking tape, and eventually you'll run out of air, but that's, like, pretty far in the future.
Yeah. And so...
I have nothing of substance to say, though.
In summary... Sometimes books that appear to be published by big five presses are, in fact, independent. A lot of times you'll have a deadline that you've delivered to the author in the contract, and something will happen, like the author will die, which is...
horrible.
Yeah, like truly one of the worst things that can happen, aside from the book. And the result of that will be that you'll still own the publication rights to this. And, in a lot of cases, the author would still be happy to have the book come out. And oftentimes that will be made clear prior to that happening. But, it adds a layer of complication. And then, the kicking the can down the road to, get it into a publishable state can also be a bit of a challenge.
We should do an episode on that.
Thanks for joining us once again.
Please send your questions to podcast@microcosmpublishing.com so we can answer them on future episodes.
And please give us 5 stars on iTunes and everywhere else that podcasts are reviewed.
You can find us on the internet at microcosm.pub.
On Twitter at Microcosm.
On Facebook at Microcosm Publishing.
On Instagram at Microcosm_pub.
And here in Portland, Oregon on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.